And welcome to Interrupting the Prison Pipeline. I'm Ruby Hawker, co-president of the League of Women Voters, Minneapolis. I want to thank you all for coming this evening to learn about this important group of interconnected issues. I also want to thank our panelists for providing their insight and experience. The Honorable Mayor Hodges, our sponsoring organizations, the St. Paul League of Women Voters, Westminster Presbyterian Church, Plymouth Congregational Church, the Headwaters Foundation for Justice, NOLA Investigates Criminal Justice Investigation, and the Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. Also, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our partners that participated in our resource fair downstairs and all of your volunteers. I really could see all the passion and all of the enthusiasm when I was speaking to you, and I want to thank you personally. The work you do is incredible and very valuable. I'd like to thank Kay Kessel and Emily Moore for their hard work, and moderator, and our moderator, Reverend Doug Mitchell. This forum is one of many topics that make up the League of Women Voters Minneapolis yearly program schedule. In October, we held another public forum on the issue of sex trafficking, and I'm pleased to announce that our much anticipated report on the issue is now available here tonight. You can find it at any of our tables. A part of the $5 suggested donation will go to Breaking Free, an organization that works on this issue. And I'd also like to invite everyone here to become a member of your local League of Women Voters. Our mission is to promote informed and active civic participation, especially at the city level, and there are endless opportunities to learn, take action, and build new skills. I would also like to enthusiastically invite you to the Second Chance Coalition's Day on the Hill at the State Capitol next Wednesday, the 12th. This forum is time to inform people of this coalition's Day on the Hill when the issues such as felon voter restoration will be taken up. More information on this event will follow tonight's program. Thank you and enjoy tonight's discussion.
My name is Doug Mitchell. I'm the Associate Pastor for Faith in Action at Westminster Presbyterian Church, and I would like to add my welcome to all of you for being here tonight. This is an amazingly complex set of issues. We have a variety of very highly qualified speakers, and we have a very energetic timekeeper. So I think we will move through the evening well. If you decide that you have a question and you want to go ahead and use your card, you can hold it up and someone will collect it, or we will collect them at the end and sort through the cards and ask as many questions as we can to the panelists after the presentations. Mark Haase, one of our speakers from the Council on Crime and Justice, gave a talk called Minnesota, the Land of Perpetual Punishment. And I think that is an accurate description of the way criminal justice and corrections work in this state. And it raises the question, certainly for religious communities, of where the issue of forgiveness comes into this conversation. And forgiveness is not just a religious question, but it's also a public, secular question having to do with negotiated agreements and compromises and reconciliation. The theological term for forgiveness is mercy. And the question of where mercy is to be found in this conversation is one that is difficult to answer because there doesn't seem to be a great deal. One of the realities is that forgiveness does not simply wipe away what has happened in the past to free the person who has acted against one. Forgiveness is a way that one frees oneself from being tied to the acts which are being forgiven. And so unless we as a state can figure out how to operate in a more forgiving and so that we're not perpetually punishing people for each mistake, those mistakes will continue to haunt us. Reconciliation requires a certain humility. We have to admit that we, on the people on each side, neither is perfect. Each has falling short. No one has the complete answer, and so compromise and ways down the middle have to be found. So that is a part of, I think, what the conversation needs to be tonight. But we have a whole set of experts that we need to hear from, but I would first like to call on Mayor Betsy Hodges. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to see so many people here for this. At the moment, I am not Reverend Mitchell, so I'll just put that down in case anybody's tempted to be confused about it. Look, there's balcony seating. This is amazing. I am so glad to see all of you here. But on the other hand, I'm not surprised. I spent a lot of time last year going around the entire community talking with folks about any number of issues, but particularly this one. Issues of equity, issues of justice in the community overall, economic justice and racial justice in particular. I do not envy people sitting on a platform in front of a table with microphones expected to speak about big issues in 30-second, 1-minute time chunks. I did that a lot last year as well. But be assured, none of your jobs depends on the outcome of this conversation. Just rest assured with that one. But the great thing is that that having that robust conversation throughout the entire community last year really solidified that this community, that Minneapolis, wants to find justice, wants to find equity, economic and racial justice and equity in our community, and we know that we need it. And if you walk into my office, I have a big whiteboard there. And at the top of the whiteboard, there are 3 questions. The third question is, how does this make the city run well? The second question is, how does this move the dial on growing the city? The first question is, how does this move the dial on equity? That's the first question. Those are the 3 questions that I ask about anything that's happening in my office. They are not erased. There's not a day that they are erased, because those are the 3 questions I ask of everything that comes before me. Everything is being looked at through those 3 lenses. And that's the question I think everybody in this room asks. It's clear by the fact that you're here. I know the folks on this stage are asking themselves that question all the time. And it's a priority that I carry in part because of the people of Minneapolis, because you all told me, yes, go do that, is making sure that for the future of our city, as well as for the future of ourselves as people, but for our future as a city, it depends on getting this question right. And these disparities that we have are found in any part of our system that you care to name, particularly in Minneapolis: housing, health, education, employment, and yes, the criminal justice system, And you all here especially, you know how much work there is left to be done. If we focused on that all the time, I'm not sure we'd get out of bed. But what gets us out of bed in the morning, knowing that there's a lot of work to be done, is knowing that this work is also happening. Is that you look around this room, and this is a room full of people who are all doing the work to move the dial on equity, to make sure that we become the community we deserve to be for every single person in the city of Minneapolis. You all are dedicated to making sure that Minneapolis and our region is a place where everybody has the opportunity to thrive, and I thank you for it. And please just give yourselves a round of applause. One of my mottos is celebrate the victory in hand. And the other is all of our staff meetings we go around the table and I ask everybody for a piece of good news, because there's a lot of bad news in the world, but there's some good news. As much good news as you can inject, the better off the balance is going to be. And so I just really wanted us all to take a moment and notice how many people in here are doing so much and how far we've come. So the network of people who are coming together to address this shows that we need the participation of everybody in this room. We need business and philanthropy. We need government. We need everybody at the table making sure that we're doing this. And I think we do have everybody at the table up here. So my office, my city, on equity, we're doing work in housing. transit so people can get to and from jobs. I've already asked the city attorney to review all the regulations governing small business so we get barriers to entrepreneurship out of the way for everybody. And in the criminal justice system, we have the Youth Violence Prevention Program. I am moving forward on my Cradle to K to make sure that kids have what they need from the very, very beginning. They have the healthiest start possible. We want to make sure that youth are getting all the opportunities they need and all the assistance they need to take advantage of those opportunities. So thank you for coming together to talk about these questions tonight. We need to take more time to pause, to look at programs, issues, objectives with that lens of equity, asking ourselves that question every day: how is what we're doing moving the dial on equity? That's what I ask myself each day. I ask you to do the same, and thank you for doing it and doing the work.
And much to her thanks, I'm not Betsy Hodges either, so. So each of our panelists has 10 minutes, and I'm not going to use up part of their time giving them introductions. You have in your bulletins, well, you can tell ministers, they call them bulletins, in your flyers, the brief descriptions of who these folks are. So Mark Haase from the Council on Crime and Justice, if you would kick us off.
Thank you. Good evening. As you already heard, I'm Mark Haase. I'm a Vice President of the Council on Crime and Justice. I'm also the co-chair of the Minnesota Second Chance Coalition, a coalition of over 50 organizations, many of which are represented here. Thank you all for participating tonight. So I have 10 minutes to cover sort of the overall criminal justice trends. I could spend at least half an hour on each one of these trends, but I want to start, just give a real quick overview of what I think are some of the most important trends, and then hopefully some of the other speakers can fill in some of the details in their area of expertise. We were just doing some research related to the voting rights restoration on what Minnesota's criminal justice system looked like when our Constitution was enacted in 1857. Turns out there were 71 felony crimes in 1857. Today, that's actually more than I thought there probably would have been, but today there's 368. Yeah, we have a more complex society, but I think this is just a stark reminder of the fact that the way we're responding to a lot of things in our society is through the criminal justice system, and I think that's really the core problem, one of the core problems we have here. But the first major trend I want to mention is that increased criminalization. The United States now has, when you take our incarceration rate and look at the average incarceration rate for the rest of the world, we have 8 times that rate. 8 times the rest of the world's average rate. In Minnesota, we're often lauded as having one of the lowest prison populations, lowest or second lowest prison populations, which is a good thing. But that sort of masks the fact that we have some very harsh sentences, particularly when it comes to drug crimes. And now if you look at the overall percentage of our population under some kind of correctional control, prison, probation, jail, we're the 8th highest in the country. The 8th highest in the country. And when you look at some of the other trends I'm going to talk about around collateral consequences of a criminal record, employment, housing, barriers to education, volunteering, voting, it doesn't matter really whether you went to prison or not. It's once you have that criminal record, especially a conviction, but even if it's sometimes just an arrest or a charge. So that's that increased reliance on punishment and the criminal justice system to deal with things like mental health issues and substance abuse and all kinds of other things has led to that reliance on punishment. Another trend that we focus on a lot at the council and with the Second Chance Coalition in trying to help people who have already been through this system be successful is the issue of criminal records access. It used to be that you had to go to the courthouse or the police station and get a paper record to find out somebody's criminal background. Now you can sit at your desk and there's hundreds and hundreds of companies that will give you free or sell you that information. And we just have not caught up as a society and in our policies to that technology. At the same time, the use of those records in every decision that seems to be made in our society, whether it's volunteering with your kids baseball team, or going to college now, employment, housing, the ones you all know about, that question is being asked, and some kind of record is becoming a barrier. On top of that, the legislature and national policymakers every year are adding new and new what we call collateral sanctions. Government imposed things that keep people from doing certain things if they have certain kinds of records. And when policymakers do that, they tend to do that in really broad brushstrokes, thinking that they have to protect the public from whole swaths of people that they don't even look, at that level they can't look at the particular circumstances of whether or not somebody really can appropriately and safely do a job, and if they're qualified. And then there's the trend, or maybe it's not so much of a trend as something that's always been there, is the issue of racial inequities. That's been in some ways, the core of our criminal justice system since our founding, and it continues to be, a great injustice that I think if a lot of these things weren't perceived and placed more disparately on the backs of people of color, we wouldn't have the policies that we have today. It's just when we have the media and others portraying certain people as being more likely to be criminals, it's easier to make those policies that people don't think are going to impact their kids and their neighbors. And I just, one thing I wanted to say about the title, the prison pipeline, I'm not crazy about that metaphor. I think it's kind of useful, but it's very incomplete. To me, that talks about one person going from, getting in trouble at school, and then all these things happening, and they end up in prison. But really what we're talking about here is a cycle. A cycle of poverty, racial injustice, increased punishment that doesn't just impact that individual, but that individual then goes back into their communities and has children, and they're held back from being part of the mainstream society, and it's a circle. It's more like a whirlpool, I guess, because the only way for that is down, and if we as a society continue to do this to huge parts of our population, we're only going to go down. So that's the bleak stuff. I also want to touch on some promising trends. Mayor Hodges kind of talked about this too, and there are good things happening. I mean, one thing is that so many people now know somebody who has a criminal record of all stripes, all backgrounds, that they're starting to go, wow, this stuff is impacting not just them, but it's impacting my kids, my neighbors as well. When I talk to legislators, it's a rare legislator that I talk to once the doors close to their office that doesn't have a close person to them that has some kind of a criminal record and is being held back. More positive trends, people are organizing and doing things around this in more effective ways. In Minnesota, the council and the other members of the Second Chance Coalition have come together en masse to advocate for these things. And many of you know that we've gotten some great things passed with bipartisan support recently. Ban the box. Minnesota is one of the first states now to require that employers wait at least until an interview before asking about criminal records, so people can be evaluated based on where they're at now and what they can offer. And that's, to me, it's not earth-shattering as far as the policies and the specifics of how somebody gets a job or doesn't get a job, but it really is paradigm shifting in how we view people with a criminal record. That forces employers and others to look at people like, oh, they have something to offer here right now today, and that's what I should be considering, not a piece of paper that says something about their past. Now, we still had to say that that can be relevant in certain circumstances, but at least people get a foot in the door. And then nationally, there's groups like the conservative movement, Right on Crime, that's starting to look at the fact that we're spending so much money on these policies that is not a good use of money, and there's better ways to use our money. There's more faith-based organizations throughout the country and in Minnesota, pushing the idea of forgiveness and mercy that we already heard about. Those, I guess, are the major positive trends, and I continue to see it with support for things like the voting rights restoration and expungement law, which just Senator Champion will be speaking later, but that's a bill that he's working very hard on. And in the House, that just passed on a bipartisan basis in a first committee. So, and people at the Capitol are talking about how these issues are really being looked at differently. So I think as long as we all can continue to convene like this and then follow it up with action, which we'll talk about at the end, then the positive trends are going to continue. Thanks a lot for having me here tonight.
Thank you. And next, Mark Kappelhoff, who is a law professor at the University of Minnesota.
Thank you. Can you hear me? There we go. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting together this wonderful forum, and I really want to thank all of you to come out on a, I guess, relatively cold night, right? Relatively speaking, actually, made it to 20, it's balmy, on a balmy night, right, like tonight, so I didn't wear a jacket here today. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm Mark Kappelhoff. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. Prior to that, for the previous 15 years, I've been there for 1 year, previous 15 years, I was a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Department of Justice. I ran the Civil Rights Division's criminal section. In that position, we prosecuted human trafficking cases, we prosecuted hate crime cases, and official misconduct, police misconduct cases all around the country, so I did that before. Returning to Minnesota, I'm from Anoka, so I'm a Minnesotan, so I speak the language, which I find very helpful. They didn't really understand me much when I worked in D.C. They thought I talked funny. I thought they talked funny, so I came home. So it's a win-win. I'm going to talk briefly in the time that I have to talk about a fair and just and equitable criminal justice system, similar to what Mayor Hodges was mentioning and Mark Haase has mentioned. And I come at this issue from two perspectives. One is as a former federal prosecutor. Spent 15 years doing that. Prior to that job, I was a public defender for 6 years. So I've been on both sides of the criminal justice system in the courtroom. I've represented clients who have been charged with a variety of crimes, and I've prosecuted individuals who've been charged with a variety of crimes. So I have that perspective, and that informs my view of what I'm going to talk about tonight. As a prosecutor, I felt very strongly about the importance of vigorously investigating and prosecuting crimes. It's a public safety issue, public safety for all of us. It's necessary to hold those who commit crimes accountable. But I always had in my mind the code of ethics which all prosecutors should follow, and that is the duty of a prosecutor is to seek justice. To seek justice, not just to convict a defendant, but to seek justice. And I carried that around with me when I investigated cases and prosecuted cases. And as a public defender, a wonderful position where you have the rare opportunity to give someone their liberty. Someone who's been charged with a crime, and you had the ability to give a voice to that person who has been charged with a crime. I did every sort of case from the lowest level misdemeanor to death penalty cases. And that was a powerful and empowering moment, knowing my client depended on me. And when I think of the criminal justice system, I think of the importance of a public defender or a defense attorney making sure the system is fair, just, and equitable. But I also carried that with me as a prosecutor, because that was my job as a prosecutor as well. And that's where I think the merging of the criminal justice system is so important, working hand in hand. Strong, vigorous prosecutor investigating cases, prosecuting individuals and holding them accountable, and a defense attorney doing his or her job defending those who have been charged with a crime. And that's what builds public confidence in the criminal justice system that we all depend on. We need to have faith in the criminal justice system because ultimately, at the end of the day, the criminal justice system is us, the public. And it doesn't work unless there is public confidence in the criminal justice system. And when the system breaks down and people don't believe in the system or they feel the system is not just, not equitable, and not fair, you lose the public's confidence. And the whole system breaks down. We can't depend on it. And we've seen some things recently, and Mark Haase mentioned a couple of those things, in our society that have caused us to question the fairness of the criminal justice system. And one of those is the incarceration rate we have in this country. We have 2.2 million people in prison in the United States. We incarcerate the most people in the world right now. Since 1980, our prison population has exploded and has grown nearly 500% in 3 decades. Our U.S. population is 5% of the world's population, but we incarcerate nearly a quarter of the world's prison population. We know how to lock people up. Our federal prison system is 40% over capacity today, as we sit here. There are nearly 250,000 inmates in our federal prisons around the country. And nearly half of those inmates in federal prisons are serving sentences because of drug offenses. And those offenses, since 1980, in the last 3 decades, the number of inmates we put in federal prisons on drug offenses has exploded by 2,000%. These are recent and current statistics. The human cost of that is obvious. The overcrowding of prisons, the lives that are destroyed, and the individuals who are put behind bars. Some who should be there, but some who shouldn't be there. And the economic cost. This is a figure I looked up fresh today. In 2010, the latest statistic I could find, based on the federal, state, and local incarceration around our country, we spend $80 billion with a B dollars on locking people up. So those sorts of things will undermine confidence in the criminal justice system. We have to be smarter about this. We have to be smarter about fighting crime because it's about public safety. We need the public's confidence to ensure public safety. The other aspect is the disproportionate impact on people of color. Here's another alarming statistic. More than 60% of the people in prison are racial or ethnic minorities. African American offenders receive sentences that are nearly 20% longer than a white person charged with a similar offense. So those are things that undermine the system. It makes it more difficult for a prosecutor, for a police officer to do his or her job when the public doesn't have confidence. So what can we do about it? Those are the alarming statistics. But let me tell you some of the good things. Just like Mark was mentioning, there are some good things happening. And let me talk about what's happening on the federal level first, because we are getting smarter. We're realizing we can't incarcerate and prosecute our way to a safer society. We have to be smarter about crime. Tough on crime was a motto, and what it's led to is exploding prison rates. Now we need to be smart on crime, use our resources in a better way. So the Attorney General of the United States has taken a great lead on this, and I was proud to serve when Attorney General Holder, while I was Attorney General Holder was the Attorney General. He has ordered all his federal prosecutors to re-examine charging policies when it comes to mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums tend to drive prison sentences. People are serving long sentences. He's directed the federal prosecutors all around the country to rethink mandatory minimum sentences for drug-related crimes. That's going to be an enormous improvement. So low-level, nonviolent offenders, you need to look at those cases individually and prosecute those cases appropriately for that individual. Not a one-size-fits-all justice system. So it will reduce the unfairly long sentences in drug cases. He's also encouraged federal government to use more diversion programs. So drug treatment, community service, instead of incarceration. Use some alternatives. The Department of Justice is also supporting, and this is Washington working, bipartisan legislation to eliminate reduced federal mandatory minimum statutes and sentences. You have people from both sides of the political spectrum, from the right and the left, who have come together and said we need to do something about these sentences. And they've come together on legislation that's currently pending in the United States Senate. That's being supported by the Department of Justice and the administration. Attorney Holder also talks about the need to focus on prevention and reentry efforts. For those who are incarcerated and come out of jail, we need to do something about that. As a federal prosecutor, I didn't want another case. I would have preferred to have been the old commercial, the Maytag repairman, where I'd like to sit at my desk and not have another case. That's what I wanted as a prosecutor. I don't need another case. So we need to do something about prevention efforts and reentry efforts so we don't have this cycle of crime. And we need to be concerned about the collateral consequences that Mark has talked about. And one thing that's happening in Minnesota, which is very impressive when it comes to collateral consequences, in the area of human trafficking, where now we have the no wrong door policy, where we're not charging juveniles who have been forced to engage be sexually exploited and engage in commercial sex acts. We no longer charge them in Minnesota. We treat them at what they are, which is victims. And that's how they should be treated, not giving a criminal record. So, just in closing, as a prosecutor, I know you do need to be tough on crime. You need to ensure public safety. I did it for 15 years. You need to vigorously investigate and prosecute cases. We need to ensure society is protected from those who violate the law and make sure victims' rights are vindicated. But we also need to be smart on crime because we can't prosecute and incarcerate our way to a safer society. So together, all of us here who've come here today, we need to recommit ourselves to a thoughtful, innovative, effective, and compassionate criminal justice system that ensures public safety, but also ensures equal and fair justice for all of us in our society. Thank you.
And now I'd like to hear from Kris Arneson, who is the Deputy Chief of Investigations for the Minneapolis Police Department. Welcome.
Well, hi, thank you. It's a real honor to be here. And I'm sure that you're probably looking at me saying, you know, what's a cop doing up there in the middle of all these really learned people? And and I want to say it is an honor to be here. We are doing a lot of things in the Minneapolis Police Department that I think have an impact on what Mark and Mark were talking about. And I want to talk about those too. But I just want to talk a little bit about myself. I came on the department in 1986, and at that time, we had been hiring women for about 10 years. And so there were about 30 of us on the department at that time. Now there's close to almost 200. But you can imagine over that time period some of the things that I have experienced and seen in the Minneapolis Police Department, and sometimes it has felt like I've been a victim myself. But you know, what I tell people, whether it's folks on the street or it's people in the police department that might not look like everybody else, is you have to persevere and keep going. And if you fall down or someone knocks you down, you pick yourself up and you keep going. And so I think that's what I want to encourage the League of Women Voters to keep on, keep this fight going. So I'm with you on that. So some of the things that we're doing in the MPD is, one thing we do is we have a diversion program for kids. And recently, we're revamping what that looks like. We're working with our partners in the diversion world to make sure that, the kids that are coming to us for diversion are going to the best place possible. And so these are for low-level offenses that officers are picking these kids up for and writing them citations. So it could be for, curfew or shoplifting or theft. And, one of the things I've heard strongly from our diversion folks is they really want us to keep that in the department and not slide that over to the county attorney's office. So, we're going to do that now, but just make it a much better program for everybody. So if those kids go to diversion, 90% of the time, they're golden, they come out and they really never reoffend again. So diversion is very important. For those kids who either don't complete diversion or they're not eligible for diversion because the ticket that was given to them isn't prosecutable. One of the things I'd like to do with that is we have a police athletic league in Minneapolis, and for those who don't know, it's cops and community being coaches with these kids, and so we have football programs and soccer programs and all kinds of programs that we go into the communities and we work. And I was told when I took this over in the investigative bureau that, and we added in the diversion piece, that we don't put bad kids in PAL. I'm like, well, what's a bad kid? And so that's one of the things I think as we're doing our refresh of our diversion program and our police athletic league is that some of these kids who, maybe don't apply for diversion or can go to diversion, we take them because, they're on the edge too, right? There's a reason that the officer may have stopped them and may have ticketed them. And so let's slide those kids into PAL and give this some positive experiences with the Minneapolis Police Department. The other thing that we're doing is we have a great program. It's called Gang Resistance. It's a gang resistance program, but it doesn't really, we really don't talk about gangs much in this. It's, we give this to 4th and 5th graders, and we really wanted to take this into the Minneapolis schools, and we got a lot of resistance in that. So we asked if we could do an after-school program. And we started with one program, and now we have 2 programs. And I sat through one of them. The officer that does it is Officer Victor Mills, if any of you know who he is. He's really a great officer. And these are 5th graders. It's after school. And, they really teach them, how to resist bullying, how to respond positively to life issues that is not violent or, gets them into trouble. So, he really becomes a mentor for these kids. And I told you I sat through it, and if I had kids, I'd want to take them and have them sit with Officer Mills so they could get that piece of what he has to say. So I think it's extremely positive. We'd like to do it in other areas. So if anybody here is an educator and is interested, and maybe we can put something together for you. It doesn't cost you anything. We absorb all the costs. So it's called the GREAT program. Another thing we're looking at is a youth leadership academy modeled after what the St. Cloud Police Department does. It's a 1-week stay at Camp Ripley for at-risk youth, and they stay there with the officers, and they're taught leadership skills. And it's probably similar to, I took, there's 3 of us women took a bunch of girls up to the Boundary Waters a few years ago, and I did it twice. And it's really a process that these girls go through. They're really happy to go get out of the city, get away from their parents. And then they find out we're kind of like their parents. And they have to clean up, and they have to cook, and we have to put up the tents, take them down, they have to paddle. And sometimes we even kind of got after them a little bit. And so, in the middle of the week, they were not happy with us. And then by the end of the week, we had really joined together, and we're in it together, and they really liked us. And we liked them, too, by the end of the week, too. So remember, these are like 15-year-old girls. So it was really fascinating for me to go up there twice and do that with them. So it's modeled after that. These kids come in, they're looking for a really great time, and they find out it's a lot of hard work. But through the hard work and perseverance and really talking, we have to talk with these kids, and they have to talk back to us. So we're really trying to form a relationship, and it's really helpful for, I think, on both sides. The juvenile trafficking has also been mentioned, where we have these. We really do, I think, a really fabulous job in the Minneapolis Police Department, trying to pull these girls away from these guys who are trafficking them, and we do not treat them as suspects. The girls are never arrested. They are victims. They are treated as victims, and we're always looking for ways that we can figure out, where these girls are, how do we make contact with them. One of them is through back pages. I have never done this work, but I do have a sergeant who does, 2 sergeants who do this, and sometimes it takes months and months and months for him to connect with the girls and talk with them before they finally disclose that they're trafficked. And then we're able to, pull them out and go after the man who was trafficking them. So I know there's a lot of interest in this room and with the League of Women Voters, and it's really exciting work. Lastly, I just want to talk about public trust has been mentioned here. And we have a fairly new police chief, Janae Harteau, and one of the things that we've done in the department is we're trying to shift culture of the police department. And as you can imagine, I told you I've been here almost 30 years. We're driving the Titanic, and we're trying to move it in a bathtub. But we are seeing some progress. And, the way that part of the, I think, the way we're going to be very successful is a lot of our officers are retiring. We're at that age right now where people are going. And we're bringing on new people, and so we're able to teach them, you know, how we want them to treat the public. You know, we want public, so that's our 3 of our goals: public safety, public trust, and employee engagement and morale. And so we're really trying to bring on, you know, people of color. And I've been having this discussion that, yeah, we want to get urban kids, but urban kids sometimes commit or are caught committing more crimes. And I came from rural Wisconsin, and I committed crimes. Okay, I did little things. I mean, I wasn't a burglar or anything like that. But, you know, I did things, right? We all do things. We're kids. We're dumb. I didn't get caught at it. And I think that as we look at these kids that we want to bring on the police department, we have to be more forgiving of the fact that, yeah, they've committed some small crimes. But let's not, you know, take them forever and not let them have the career that they want and the career choice they have. The other thing that I'd like to do is have some influence on people. And so in my police department, so one of the things that I do is, you know, we have something called Code 4 where they come in every couple weeks and the commanders come in and talk about the crimes and what they're doing in their precincts. I had to do it when I was a precinct commander. And it's not okay just to come in now and say, if it was a rape victim, she was drunk. Well, that's not an excuse. I mean, so what if she was drunk? You know, or he was drunk, the rapist was drunk. So he still committed the rape. Or on you know, we have watch commander logs, or when things go out, you know, on the air. It's just not okay. And I go and I have discussions with people about, okay, you're looking for a suspect, and it's just black male suspect who committed the robbery. That doesn't tell you anything, and all it does is it pushes perceptions that black males are bad. And I think we have to stop that. So I've been told to stop. I appreciate that, thanks. I appreciate your time, and thank you for letting me be here.
And now Lee Blons, who is the Executive Director of the Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative.
Thank you very much for being here. And I want to tell you a little bit about Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. We grew out of Plymouth Congregational Church, which is where you are today. And we have grown into a collaboration of over 60 congregations committed to ending homelessness in our community. We provide emergency shelter, we develop housing, and we advocate for the public and private resources necessary to end homelessness in our community. One of the things that we do in particular is to create housing that we call supportive housing. It integrates both services right into the affordable housing itself. And so it's one of the very effective models that have been out there in the community to help people break that cycle of homelessness, but also as we look at it for this group of people that we're talking about in terms of being able to break a cycle of recidivism. And so we think it's a really effective model that we can try to bring to scale in our community. And part of what I want to share with you is our efforts to create a particular housing development here in Minneapolis. As I mentioned, we work in partnership with congregations, and so in partnership with Westminster Presbyterian Church and Plymouth Congregational Church, we have decided to focus on creating housing in our community. We're pleased to share that Better Futures, which is an organization some of you may be familiar with, they are working with a lot of African American men in particular that have had criminal histories in the past and are working on jobs and social enterprise. And one of the greatest challenges they face is housing. And so they have some short-term housing, and they're able to get people immediately housed, but what about long-term housing? And as we've talked about, that most landlords are going to screen people out, particularly with felony convictions. And so how do we create that without jobs and housing, people are going to continue to revert to the old friends, old neighborhoods, and old habits that could get them picked up again and put back into jail or prison. And so if we're able to provide that stability in affordable housing that breaks that cycle and allows people to reestablish their place in our community with each other and with us, that we will be able to have a huge impact. It's part of where we believe the resources need to go rather than in terms of mass incarceration and the cost of incarceration that are extraordinary that we all pay as taxpayers. And as studies across the country have demonstrated that supportive housing brings down recidivism and is in fact more affordable. And so it's a smart investment. I like the expression smart on crime. And so that one of the things that we want to share is that as we create this kind of housing in our community, it not only benefits those who live there, but it benefits all of us because it is in fact about public safety as well as the private welfare of the people who would live there. So part of what I'm here to ask you for is for your help as we go forward. These kinds of efforts often take a whole community to be successful. And I just want to share a little bit experience. As you leave today from the parking lot here at Plymouth and look across the street, you'll see Lydia Apartments. And for those of you who may not know, Lydia Apartments is housing for 40 men and women who are chronically homeless before they moved in. And it was an extraordinary effort to create Lydia Apartments that's now been open for 10 years. This church actually was picketed every Sunday for a year to try to prevent that from happening. And so people have a lot of fears about who our neighbors are and what they might do. And so we know as we find a site in our community and share that this is what we're working with Better Futures to create, that we're going to have people who are afraid about what we're bringing into the neighborhood and into the community. And so we're going to ask you to join us in that effort as we work with the community to create that support. Because part of what I want you to know is that Lydia Apartments, 75% of the men and women that live at Lydia Apartments have a criminal history, and 20% of them have had a felony conviction. And we've been extraordinarily successful, because what I want you to know that the neighborhood that was so worried about Lydia Apartments 10 years ago is now a neighborhood that will go out and tell people that we have done, that well-managed and well-maintained housing is a community asset, and that this can be a benefit to the community. And so we've demonstrated our experience at Lydia that we know how to do this and we can do it well. We created Nicollet Square in South Minneapolis, which serves homeless young adults, men and women. To be honest, at the time, the police lieutenant in the neighborhood was very nervous about what we were creating and worried that we were going to bring kind of gangbangers into the neighborhood. And so we had a lot of tough neighborhood meetings to talk about, once again, who we were and what we were creating. And I'm pleased to say that just a couple weeks ago, in the very gym where we had those tough neighborhood meetings, 5 years ago, we had 900 neighbors come through for a fundraiser for housing for homeless youth. And so it's an extraordinary thing that we can do as a community. And there's lots of daunting things, and we all need to be involved in the broad issues. But sometimes taking on something really specific like this and knowing we can make this happen is a way for people to get involved in the community. We know it, for us to be able to create this housing, our vision is that we will have some short-term housing for people who need immediate and emergency housing, and that then as people demonstrate their commitment to a life free of crime, free of drugs and alcohol, that people will then be able to move into longer-term housing with those supportive services that connect them with life coaches and employment and education and bring them back into our community. So we know as we walk out into the community, it takes neighborhood and community support to make it happen. It also takes a strong organizations with the expertise to make it happen. And of course, I believe that both Beacon and Better Futures bring that expertise together along with the congregations, and I hope many of you to help make this a successful endeavor. And then it takes capital. It'll cost about $8 to $10 million to build, a 40 to 50 unit apartment building in our community. It takes rental assistance because most people as they move in will not have the resources to pay the full rent. And it will take the supportive services that can really transform lives. That bricks and mortar are the foundation, but they're not enough. We need to also bring in the support, peer support and community support and professional expertise to help people make positive choices in their life as the streets can become a temptation to pull them back. And so, so those are efforts and resources that don't today exist. I mean, there's a reason there's not more of this housing, and it's because we need to work with our legislature and our county to find those resources and to commit to the people who are most in need. And so as we work on this over the next 2 to 3 years, we hope that you will join us, first through our work getting it through the City Council. It was wonderful to have Mayor Hodges here today. And we expect to be able to announce the site in the next 6 months, and would love to be in communication with you as we walk that out in the neighborhood, and then in the following year to get the capital rental assistance and services funding to make this a reality in our community, and to be able to demonstrate the impact that it can have, and then hopefully to be able to work with you and other great nonprofit organizations to take this to scale so we can in fact break this cycle and help people return to their community and return to their families. And so I just want to ask you, as you leave, if you're interested in getting further involved, we have material on the tables as you would exit if you would like to get more information about our organization and how to get involved. And particularly for those of you who are members of faith communities, we in particular partner with congregations to become directly involved in this work and would really welcome the opportunity to bring you into our collaborative so that together we can end homelessness and create a home for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. And now Larry Lucio, who has worked in the Hennepin County Juvenile Detention System.
Thank you. Well, if you're here to learn about test scores and grades, etc., I'm sure I'm going to disappoint you. Allow me to get on a soapbox just for a minute or two. In my 40 years in education, I've come to realize that the educational landscape tends to reflect the political landscape. And also that our education systems are inherently racist and classist. Having said that, and again, putting 40 years into my career, I've gradually become aware that we no longer talk about the poor. We talk about middle class. And I can almost guarantee you that the majority of young men and women that I've had the pleasure of working with are not middle class. So we continue to create programs, we continue to create bills and laws, et cetera, that reflect and support middle class. And again, we continue to forget about the poor people. I'll get off the soapbox now and talk about my really great experience. I had the privilege and honor of working with the staff and the young people at Stadium View School. It's a Minneapolis secondary public school. It's located in the Juvenile Detention Center, Hennepin County Juvenile Detention Center. One of the things that we really impressed upon our families, because it was very important to connect with our families right away, as well as our students, is that they needed to get settled as quickly as possible, but to begin to talk about their transition. And again, one of the main areas that were really obvious that needed work was our young people were coming into the system and no one was informing them of what to expect there or in their next placement, whether it be in the community or whether it be in another facility. To compound that, the parents and the families were even less informed. So again, having the opportunity to work with the, I think, exceptional staff, teachers and support staff at Stadium View, and again, there were some in the Juvenile Corrections Department that were very good in collaboration with us, trying to figure out what we needed to do. But a big part of our initial contact with our students wasn't about test scores, it wasn't about their previous grades, it was about where were they social and emotionally. It was our belief that once we understood where they were social and emotionally, and that they understood that we wanted to create a relationship, we were very highly relational in our work, they began to understand, one, the importance of education, but two, the importance of having someone in an educational situation that cared about them. And that was really important. In the years that I was there when I interviewed staff, I really, it was more important that one, do you like kids? You know, sometimes teachers get a little hyper about things and they want to know everything about a kid. And I remember my first year at Stadium View, all of the teachers wanted to know why a kid was being brought into the detention center. And obviously, it impacted their ability to be objective in their instruction. So we had a little bit of, with the union, we had a little bit of a disagreement because there wasn't a reason for them to know that. All they needed to do was instruct the young man or woman in front of them. And as we worked together, they became, and they understood that that was going to be the lay of our land. Again, back to Stadium View, we worked really hard at collaborating with the juvenile court people. I might add, in my 6 years there, we were never visited by a juvenile court judge, which to me is somewhat reflective when you think that they're in a position to make decisions about our young people's lives. And in a regular school, oftentimes they want to know what the kid is doing in the school. Well, I'm here to tell you, very seldom did anybody ask what those kids were doing in our school. So that kind of gave me an idea that they maybe weren't as interested as they probably could be or should be. Probation officers. I can count on 3 fingers the number of probation officers that came in to talk to me about any of our students. Again, in the regular schools, they claim that they want to know about these kids, how the kids are doing in school, to report back at the hearing. We did have a lot of really good success working with the juvenile detention staff. They were very interested. We had some different ideas on what we thought we needed to do with our students, and of course we took the risk, and they took a risk as well. But I think in the end, it worked in the best interest of our students. As I was talking, we worked really hard at transition. When the student comes in, we did what we called our meet and greet. We met with the student. Our community liaison would meet with the family, communicate with the family very quickly about what was going to be, what was expected. Sadly, oftentimes, many of our parents weren't even aware that their young men and women were even going through an educational process while they were incarcerated, which, again, was very sad. But again, it was really important for our staff and for our students to connect, create a relationship, also get our community, culturally appropriate community agencies involved with our families, because again, once that student was placed, the family still needed to be connected to the community, a culturally appropriate agency. And that was very helpful. We had a parent, we had a lot of flack for it, and not many people believed it was necessary, but we had our own parent council, and it was amazing. We averaged anywhere from 18 to 20 parents who would come on a regular basis to hear about what we were doing, but even more so to share their stories with each other. And it was very enlightening, very informative for us as a staff. But I think also for the parents, it was very reassuring that they weren't alone. We created what they call a freedom school. I remember talking to Marian Wright Edelman and lightly challenging her to the fact that we were aware that a freedom school had never occurred or had been active in a secured facility, particularly with her concept of prison to the cradle to the pipeline, prison pipeline. We suggested that we wanted to take an opportunity to create a freedom school at Stadium View. And again, with the hard work of our staff and the support and collaboration of the juvenile detention staff, we became the only secured facility in the country to hold a freedom school. And as I'm aware, it's still going on. But again, that was another, you can't do it, it doesn't make sense. It did make sense, and we did do it. Juvenile detention alternative initiatives. I'm not very politically astute, and I know that's been purported to be the catch-all for, and I would be the first to say, yes, it has lessened and lowered the number of young people in the detention center, but it has done nothing for the disparity in terms of the young people of color in our juvenile detention center. We continue to have, I would say, 8 out of 10 young men and women are kids of color. So the JDA, I'm sure it's having some impact. There are a lot of people patting each other on the behind about it. But I'm here to tell you that until it impacts the disparity aspect of the number of kids of color in our juvenile detention center, I'm not sold on it. Again, I'll probably hear about that in the next day or two. One really, I spent 15 years as a guidance counselor in schools, and so I really enjoy working one-to-one with our students. And one of the things I want to leave you with is that our students continually, without question, one of their main reasons for failing at school, for failing at life, if you want to say that, is the lack of respect. And you've heard my colleagues here at the table, and you'll continue to hear it, fairness. It's their way of saying that life isn't fair. And, you know, people chuckle about, well, respect, big deal. It is a big deal. And it's hard to explain to them that life isn't fair. It's hard to explain to them that the things that are happening aren't fair. And so when you hear that, it's not to be taken lightly. When they say the reason is that they're having problems is disrespect, they mean it. I'm supposed to stop, so I'll do so. Thank you.
And we'll hear from Justin Terrell with Justice for All at Take Action Minnesota.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting me here and putting this together. I know it wasn't easy, so thank you. So I have 10 minutes to talk about jobs, and I'll give you what you need to know in about 30 seconds. It's bad. And you gotta excuse me because I'm a little upset right now. And I'll tell you why in a minute. We have a 27% unemployment rate for African American men in the Twin Cities area. Did I say that right, Mark?
I couldn't hear the percent.
27%?
I think that's about right.
Nobody just flipped over a table. Nobody just threw a chair. Nobody stormed out of here. A major barrier to employment is the criminal justice system. You already knew that, which is why you're here. The reality is that Mark, the ex-prosecutor, law school guy over here, you know, he can tell you how the cases he tried on both sides as a defender and a prosecutor have created barriers to people after they got out of prison. We can talk to the police officers, they're on this panel as well, about the barriers that their system has created for people on the other side of prison. This isn't brain surgery. We don't need more statistics. What we need is to stop having forms. We need to stop being polite. And we need to start thinking about the people that you know that are being screwed by these systems, by the criminal justice system, from the courtroom to the police car to the jailhouse, whatever part of the system, people are being screwed. So I just do a quick little poll, unofficial poll here. Raise your hand if you know somebody who has a criminal record. Those of you who didn't raise your hand are lying or too lazy to raise your hand. There are 1 million people in this state with criminal records. Pastor, you're going to have to pray for me.
I got you. Go on and say what you need to say, brother.
I was talking about Minnesota Nights earlier, and I said, one of my favorite hip hop lines crossed my mind is, "It's not compassionate, only polite. We're well trained." And in Minnesota, we're well trained to go along with the status quo. We are well trained to just kind of nod our heads and be polite about things. Well, that's not going to work, is it? It's not going to work. The way things are unjust. And we will not change the way things are by being polite. I'm glad we have a school in the juvenile detention center. I'm happy that we're working on PAL, and I'm excited that ex defenders people are raising their consciousness around these issues. I am happy that our systems are evolving around, and people inside the system are evolving their consciousness around these issues. I'm excited about that. It's not enough. It ain't enough. And at the end of the day, I'm gonna be honest, a lot of the white people in this room, y'all ain't gonna fix my problem. A lot of the social service folks in this room, y'all ain't gonna fix my problem. What we need is for a lot of the people in this room to get out of the way and start letting brothers on the block start building with each other and start developing ourselves as leaders so that we can stand up and call attention to the problems that are screwing our community over, and we can start developing freely the solutions to the problems in our community. Now, I'm not saying, now look, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. Especially, I'm talking to the white people in the room. League of Women Voters. There is a voting rights bill that's gonna be coming up this year. I need you to call your legislators and tell them to vote for that. Because African Americans make up 5% of the population, and we make up 28% of the population that is disenfranchised from the vote. That's criminal. And we need y'all to vote, and we need y'all to vote for a bill that changes that. But when it comes to community conversation and dialogue, I need more spaces that look like me. Where we can start developing the leaders from our own community to start taking on these issues and changing things. Leaders like Senator Bobby Joe Champion, right? Like someone who represents our community and helped pass Ban the Box last year. We just need that space. And some of y'all won't understand that. Some of y'all will be put off by it. But I need y'all to understand that, like, that's what I'm doing at Take Action. That's what we're doing at NOC. That's what we're trying to do at the African American Leadership Forum. The NAACP in Minneapolis has just woken up even. And we are gonna build leaders in our own community to take on the challenges that are facing our community. And we need y'all to vote and support those things. But we don't necessarily need you to try to lead these conversations. And I'll tell you why. I have a criminal record. And Mark, as enlightened as you are, not Haase, but the other guy, if I was in the courtroom when you were a prosecutor, we know how that was turning out. So having me on a panel with this guy is nice, and we'll network and it'll be all good. But let's just be honest. Challenging the system from a classroom is different than challenging the system from a courtroom. And we need more people in the courtroom who are going to challenge the system. And I just want to take a shout out to the Minneapolis Police Department. I was on the Civil Review Authority for 6 years. and I've seen the complaints, and I've seen I know how difficult it is to be an officer, and I also know that my 16-year-old mentor got stopped my 16-year-old mentee got stopped the other day for walking in the middle of the street on the north side, which if anyone has been on the north side knows that people walk in the middle of the street. Not to reinforce stereotypes, but I'm just saying, like, I'm appreciative of all the work you guys are doing, but like come on, like, we gotta do better. We gotta get back to community policing. I need some folks to start reading David Simon. I need some folks to start listening to OA over at North High School. We need y'all to be in better relationship to the community, because this isn't about confidence in a system. The system, the way it is, you heard Mark say, the law about voting disenfranchisement was passed in 1857. That means the system was intentional then, and it's intentional now. The system is working. These are not new ideas. These are ideas that have permeated the system since the beginning. So how were they treating black folks in 1857? Well, if our conditions haven't changed, 45 years being able to vote and having one black president, that ain't changed to me. That's a mild swelling of progression, and it's not enough. I didn't do as bad as I thought I was going to do.
Justin, can you say something about jobs?
It's bad. But last year, we talked to a company called Target Corporation, and they decided, based on the leadership that came from within our community, they decided to change their hiring practices across the country. And if we can move one of the 19 Fortune 500 companies in our state to be a better partner with the community, I think we can move all of them. And that's how you fix a jobs problem in Minneapolis and our state. Thank you.
And now Reverend Brian Herron, the pastor of Zion Baptist Church.
Good evening. Want to thank the League of Women Voters, and especially Kay, who, oftentimes when people hear people speak on subjects, folks just kind of nod their heads and say, okay, and they don't do anything. But Kay heard a message, and it resonated deep down inside her, and she persisted and persevered to get this forum going, so that people could hear what was really going on. A Greek philosopher student once asked him, when will justice come to Athens? And he said, justice will only come to Athens when those who are not injured are just as angered as those who are. One of the things that we have to look at is when we think about people who are incarcerated, we call them convicts, felons, scum, scary, bad people, but no one ever says someone's son and daughter. That's right. No one ever says someone's nieces and nephews. No one ever says mother and father. No one ever says neighbor. Because, see, if we can call them other names, then we take away the humanity from them. And if we take away their humanity, then we can treat them any way we want to and won't nobody care. There's nothing redeeming about prison. There's nothing redeeming about it. You're herded and counted like cattle. You told what to do all day long. You're demeaned, and your humanity is taken from you. Matter of fact, prison sets up a system that creates almost like what was happening on the streets, because when you're in prison, you gotta have money. If you don't have money in prison, if ain't nobody sending you commissary, then what you gonna do? You gonna hustle. And so you're perpetuating the same behavior and the same attitude that was being perpetuated out on the street. People talk about the violence in the African American community, and particularly on the north side, but no one ever talks about the violence of poverty. No one ever talks about the conditions, and if you came up in some of the conditions that some of these folks come up in, I think you might make worse choices than what they made. And so, so when I came out of prison, I learned a lot about the guys and the conditions of that were causing what was going on. And I feel like the Spirit led me to start a program, a mentoring program. I don't do the program anymore. I'm not at Greater Minneapolis Council of Churches anymore. But this program was meant to go inside, to recruit mentors from the community, go inside the prisons, begin to visit with them and work with them before they get out, establishing a relationship so that when they came out, they had positive people and a positive place in community to come out to. Most of the people who get out of prison only have the same folks they were getting in trouble with who are glad to see them back. They've burned some bridges with a lot of the positive people and a lot of the family, and so they don't really have those relationships reestablished yet. And what we did was we recruited mentors from everywhere. And one of the questions we would ask the folks when we go in and interview them for a mentor was, do you care or do you have a preference for culture or age of a mentor? And 95% of the people said no, as long as it's somebody who's really interested in me and who really wants to help me. Because most of these folks don't feel like they're valued, and the idea of somebody who doesn't even know them coming in and being interested in their life and wanting to hear their story, because see, everybody who hears their story either is in the system or is interrogating them, and so they're being called liars and they're being called all kinds of names, and they're being told that they're criminally minded and that they need medication. And here's somebody that's listening to their story and not judging them. See, all you see is what's on the news, but you don't know the story behind the story. You don't know what went on in their life that brought them to the brink of where they happen to be at that moment now. And I'm not making excuses for anybody, because wrong is wrong and right is right. But once somebody serves their time, there should not be this continuum of punishment. It's almost like a scarlet letter. I can't get a job, I can't do this, I can't do that, and if I'm on probation, I'm just screwed, because they tell me whether I can go work at this job or not. I can go find a good job, and the probation officer tell me, no, you can't work there. So we thought about housing, we thought about jobs and all that stuff, but the thing that struck me the most was that these men and women needed transformation in their lives. They needed renewed minds and different ways of seeing themselves, different ways of seeing their community, different ways of seeing their family. And people only change through connection with other people. And so we began to put mentors in their lives, and 59 to 60% of the people that we mentored over the 6 years that we were doing the program stayed connected to their mentor when they got out. Those who stayed connected to their mentor, every year we only saw 2 or 3 go back, and that was for probation violations, not new crimes. The other 47% who did not stay connected with their mentors when they got out, we saw almost half of them go back. And when we would walk back into those facilities, the first thing they would say to us is, do you think my mentor will come back and see me again? And we said yes. Because see, sometimes change is very difficult. You'll know that. You know how difficult change is. You try to go on a diet and it don't work. You go work out every first of the year, the gym is packed. Right about now, it's starting to thin out. because change is difficult. And so imagine being conditioned to a certain lifestyle, and now all of a sudden you're trying to change, you want to change. Everything in you says that something needs to change, but how do you do that? And then when you think about coming out of prison, when you've been locked up, even for a year, everything is different. Think about people who've been locked up for 5 or 10 years. Everything is different. And how do you negotiate and how do you navigate life unless somebody is there to help you do that? You got to reconnect with family. You got to go see your probation officer. You got to go find a job. You got to do all this stuff, and ain't nobody helping you do it. They just telling you you have to do it. And so we create this perpetual system, the prison industrial complex, which is flourishing, and the new commodity is immigrants. Here we've decided in America to warehouse our future rather than to educate them, rather than to grow them. Here you have a captive audience, literally. People who would change if there was something. See, why would I change on the inside if nothing's going to change for me on the outside? I know how to survive this way, but if I get out and I've changed and I'm trying to find a job and I'm trying to do resumes, which I really don't understand and don't know how to do because ain't nobody ever showed me how to do them, and I'm trying to do all this stuff, but who's walking with me? Who's opening doors for me? The best thing about the mentors was they had a network of influence all their own. And so they could connect the mentees to jobs. They could connect them to housing. We did mentoring because my understanding is this: if something doesn't change here and here, then they're not going to keep the job and they're not going to keep the housing. God bless you.
Yeah, that's fine. You can come and use this one. State Senator Bobby Joe. Bobby Joe Champion.
Let me too briefly just join in thanking all those responsible for this forum tonight for all the hard work that they've done by putting together what I am calling a great panel up here. So let's give them a hand again. And it's always so refreshing to hear Pastor Herron because he speaks with such, come on, we can do better than that. Let's give him a hand for this. I think it's always important for someone to be able to speak with such authority and experience and courage. You know, sometimes we hide behind a mask and we don't like for other folks to know exactly some of the things that we've gone through. I am the senator for 59, Senate District 59, which encompasses all of North Minneapolis, the North Loop or the Warehouse District, all of downtown, east and west of downtown, and Bryn Mawr. And I'm the little boy from North Minneapolis who went to Hall Elementary School for a brief moment, Lincoln Elementary School, Jordan Junior High School, North High School, McAllister College, and William Mitchell for Law School. And I say that not to, brag upon myself, but I say that in order to give you a glimpse of my journey. That's right. And, people always say that your journey really can and will have some imprint on your life. So growing up in North Minneapolis, because I was born and raised in North Minneapolis, so I'm the 5th out of 6 kids. My mother's from Hooks, Texas, and my dad is from Hope, Arkansas. And I want to tell you now that no, my dad doesn't know Bill Clinton, because people always ask me that question. Does he know Bill Clinton? But it's in the South where I learned that I better go to school because I learned that I was allergic to manual labor. But here's the interesting thing, because my parents have always been individuals who always said to us that it's important for you to go to church. And they didn't just send us to church, but we went to church. But it's that experience that has helped me in the legislature, because I believe in what they call redemptive policies. I believe in policies that says individuals, even if they've made a mistake, we should find ways to re-engage them in society.
That's right.
So through that lens is how I look at things. So think about the prodigal son. We're here in the church, so of course I'm not a minister, but I can at least quote a scripture. Think about the prodigal son. The prodigal son one day came and said to his father, "Hey, Dad, give me everything that should come my way." And it reminds you sometime of young people. Sometimes they get to a point where they think they know everything. And they say, "Hey," the prodigal son said, "give me everything that is mine." Dad says, and I'm just going to paraphrase it because I wasn't there during that time, so I can only imagine what he says. He says, "Son, it's not time for you to do that yet. Let's work this out a little bit." But the prodigal son said, no. It's time for me to go. And the dad did what? Gave him everything that was due to him. But when the prodigal son left home, he had a whole lot of friends, is what the Bible says. He started participating in righteous living. He was partying it up. And isn't it true that most people say that when you have money, you always have friends? But when you don't have any more money, you are asking, where are my
Friends.
Absolutely, that's what you're asking. But that is what the scripture says, that he began to party and his friends became few. And when he looked around, he found himself in a strange set of circumstances. He had no friends and he had no money. So he even started doing the best he can, and he ended up in the pigs area. Yes. And eating the slop of what the pigs had. But here's what's important about this. There's two things that's important about this story. The scripture says, when the prodigal son came to himself. See, sometimes in order for there to be transformation, you first of all, you got to come to yourself. And then he said, when he said he came to himself, he says, well, hey, I need to go home. Why am I here? My father who owns so much of everything, why am I still living in these set of circumstances? So he decided once he came to himself that he was going to go home. And the scripture says, and this still goes to what, follow me, I'll take you somewhere, don't worry. The scripture says that once the prodigal son, who was afar off because his daddy was waiting on him, because that's something about a parent, you always know that one day your son or daughter is going to come back home. It's just a matter of time. And the scripture says that the prodigal son was on his way and his daddy saw him afar off. And the daddy didn't wait for the son to reach the threshold of the house and say, "Dad, I'm sorry for everything that I've done." The scripture says that his dad ran to him and said, "Prepare the best of everything that we have." And all I'm saying is I believe that in society, when someone comes to themselves and they pay their debt to society, that when we see them afar off coming back into the fold, that we should run to them and do the things that we need to do to help them. Now, it is also true that in that particular story, that what occurred at that particular time, his dad didn't make him recount over and over again everything and every decision that he did wrong. But he welcomed him back home. That's what I see as redemptive policies. So in the state legislature, when I look at this, I try to find ways to improve our quality of life. I try to deal with the issues that most people don't like to deal with. For an example, tomorrow, and already on Wednesday, and I want to thank Mark Haase and the Council on Crime of Justice for all their great work with second chance legislation and just working very hard. And even though they say second chance legislation, in church we like to say we serve a God of another chance.
That's right. That's right.
And you know why? Because you may be past that second chance.
That's right.
But God of a what? Another chance. So we have tomorrow up an expungement bill, which is attempts to seal records, right? And we are weighing it, we are balancing, we are fighting like left and right. We got law enforcement working with us, we have county attorneys working with us, we have commissioners working with us, we have advocates working with us, but everybody's struggling with this issue. Because it's not a simple issue, it's a complex issue. But there's a commitment for us to do what? Find ways to make sure folks have an opportunity to work.
That's right.
To find housing.
That's right.
To get educational opportunities. Because if we want them to be productive members of society, we have to create the pathway for it to happen. So that's what we're doing. But let me say this. She told me not to just talk about expungements today. I'm supposed to be talking about voting, right? Let me say this, and I won't go past my time because I know we got a good timekeeper back here and up here somewhere. How much more time do I have? Okay, 1:40. Here it is. It's gonna be quick. So do you not know that right now I have a bill that says that if an individual is not incarcerated, they should have the right to vote.
Amen.
Now, that is a change. That is a change to Minnesota Statute 609.165, and I know you don't have to remember that, but I know these lawyers do. Right now, our law says that once you serve your time, once you are off paper, then you can vote. I say, since we have longer probationary sentences, some people are not going to prison at all. If they're paying taxes, and if they're doing everything else, why shouldn't they be able to vote? Now, I can hear my good friend Trey Shana, and I can hear my good friend Cheryl Morgan Spencer asking me a very critical question. Why is that so important? Number one, I believe it's important because people should be able to exercise their basic constitutional right. The second reason that I believe that it's important is because if you don't understand since 1857 when some of these felony issues were put in place and when people were no longer able to vote, that there is a method behind the madness, let me put it that way.
That's right.
Do you not know, for an example, that 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 Minnesotans have some sort of record, right? When you also compare that to those who can't vote and you carve them out, then you say, what? And I know she said stop, so I'm gonna make it quick. So if you say, well, what is going on? Do you not know that there will be a change in the way policies are created and embraced in the state of Minnesota based on who's eligible to vote?
That's right.
Let me make this point for you real quick. Senator Al Franken won by how many votes? 312 votes. Governor Mark Dayton won by a little over 8,000 votes. If you continue to cut back the number of people who are eligible to vote, it changes the outcome of elections. So we have to think about this on multiple levels, because if we don't, then guess what's going to happen? We could have a different person in the Senate right now. We could have a different person in the executive office right now. And therefore, some of these bills that we believe to be very important would not be signed into law right now. So I just think it's important for us to have redemptive policies, and I'm going to get out of your way because I got to run home and see what the end's going to be. But God bless and you have a wonderful day.
We may need to add a career change here and you can be the preacher. That's right. And Susan Tucker gets to follow this. Susan Tucker is the executive director of the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Reverend Misjel. It is my pleasure to be with you this evening, and I would really like to echo the thanks to the League of Women Voters, Minneapolis League, for bringing us all together this evening around this very important issue. And I'm a little intimidated now that I have to follow such vibrant speakers, but you know, it's when we talk about voting, it's not necessarily the most exciting thing that people think about. But it truly is the most basic right that we have as citizens. It is the way in which we all get to have a voice in our communities. And so by supporting the bill that Senator Champion talked about, not only will those that have been deprived the right to vote get to vote, but it will be a restorative element to our community. Because those that are participating in our community are paying taxes, are working, are sending their children to school. When they don't get a chance to cast that vote, they really feel like they're ostracized. And that's just plain wrong. And while I have not walked in the footsteps of those who have been in prison, I think the League's history as understanding what it's like to be excluded from using voice does give us a little credibility in understanding what it is to be excluded. And so, as you think about the things that we have brought up this evening, I would just ask you to think about, first of all, we'll take some action on restoring the vote and supporting the law that Senator Champion is advocating for, and to be reminded that this is really an equity issue for all of us, and so that by restoring the right to vote to those who, for whatever reason, are unable to, this will make us a stronger community in the long run. So I would ask that when you see the opportunity to call your legislator to support this bill, that you do so. Thank you.
Now, if people have questions that they've written on their cards, if they would hold those up, we will collect them. But I get the first question, and I think we can assume that this is a group of activists, not a group of people here for academic interest only. So
don't leave until you've taken action.
The first question is, what would you tell them to do? What action should be taken?
So I'm going to talk just about that briefly. Cards are being passed out. Do not put them in your purse. I saw you, Brenda. Fill those out now, please. I don't know if we have pens, but if you can borrow a pen from a neighbor. These are going to, so you already heard that Second Chance Day on the Hill is next Wednesday at 2 p.m. at the Capitol Rotunda. Whether you can go or not, we hope you're there in person, but we're going to deliver these for you to your legislator. It's really powerful for them to get something written from their constituents. If you don't know the name of your senator or representative, you need to fill it out, both those cards, so we can give one to your senator and one to your representative. If you don't know their names, leave it blank and we'll fill it out for you. But please fill it out tonight and leave it with one of the volunteers, and we'll collect them and distribute them on Second Chance Day on the Hill. The only way these things are going to change that we've been talking about is if you show up, and that if the policymakers are forced to speak to and see the people that are impacted by it. That's what Second Chance Day on the Hill is about. We've been doing it for 7 years now. Justin's going to be turning people out. We're going to be turning people out. The League is going to be getting, all the 50 members of the coalition are going to be getting people there, so that the policymakers have to sit down and look at the people that these policies are affecting and really think about what that means. So those are 2 action steps that we hope you'll take tonight. Thank you.
Okay. We have a question for Lawrence Lucio. What is a freedom school? Quickly.
Well, Freedom School is a program that was created by Marian Wright Edelman for after school or summer school kind of support for students, academic. And we're looking for a different approach to working with our young men and women at Stadium View, and so we created the Freedom School as a summer program in lieu of a traditional summer school, and it's worked out very well.
One question, what would, where there is a legalization of medical marijuana before the legislature right now, the question is, if we legalize some drugs, how will that affect the prison population? Anyone who would like to?
Are you asking the police officers?
I'm asking anyone who wants to answer.
I'll take a stab at it. I just want to, the difference is it's about medical marijuana and not like medicinal marijuana, which is what they have in like Washington and Colorado. I mean, the reality is like we have a war on drugs that is basically a war on the black community, and we need to dismantle that, right? We need to make that illegal. And so the issue, people want to talk about legalizing drugs and whatnot. I'm less interested in the legalization of drugs. I'm more interested in the decriminalization of drugs. Because we know that on the north side, a kid smoking a blunt is 10 times more likely, like literally 10 times more likely to be encountered by a police officer than a white dude, frat boy sitting on his stoop in Dinkytown who admits to higher drug use and admits to higher criminal activity under the influence of drug use. And so like we know that the war on drugs is not really a war on drugs, otherwise we'd be sending SWAT teams to Dinkytown, but instead we have the shooting range in the 4th precinct on the north side.
No, we'd be sending SWAT teams into corporate America.
Okay. We've got several questions related to building trust in the criminal justice system. How can we build trust into the criminal justice system, and how was the elimination of the Civilian Review Board? How does that play into the issue of trust in the city of Minneapolis?
Say the question again.
I have to say that's out of my bureau, but
okay.
I can speak a little bit to that, and that that it was I think they do a good job of coming together and working together with what they have. So when these complaints come in, it's 2 officers and it's 2 civilians that sit down and look at them, and from what I understand is that they're always pretty much in agreement on where the case should go. So if it should go to a higher level, or if it should go stay at a lower level. So I think if you don't have trust in the system, you have to contact your politicians and push for that. But I think the system that we have right now actually works a little better than the system we had before. So I didn't have a lot of trust in the Civilian Review Board, the way it was working, because I had to work with those cases every day. So when I got those cases, they really, I personally, as a precinct commander, I didn't think that they were investigated as well as they could have. Not that there weren't good people there that were doing good work, but I think we have just a little better system now. I'm not saying it can't be fixed, and it can't be better.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in? A question for Reverend Herron. In the mentorship program, when you were involved in it, how many of the mentors were recruited from the north side?
We had mentors from everywhere, from north side, south side, suburbs. We recruited from everywhere. It didn't matter where they came from. The willingness to really get involved in the lives and the messiness of someone's life and to walk with them on their journey was more important to us. And that's what people did.
Thank you. A question about how can we help people understand the ramifications of pleading guilty on jobs, housing, etc. both from a police point of view and from a court point of view.
So one thing that's very important with regard to that is the right to counsel, the right to good defense attorneys who represent their clients zealously. And it's very important. We have I think, a crisis in this country when it comes to providing adequate defense counsel that advise clients of what the rights are and what the consequences are, the collateral consequences of pleading guilty, because sometimes the collateral consequences ultimately are greater than what the criminal sanctions are. And that's why we have a Sixth Amendment in this country. It's part of the American fabric. And what that means is everyone's entitled to representation. And we need to do more to fund the public defenders here in the state of Minnesota and throughout the country, because I think that is something that's very much lacking in this country. And when you lack defense counsel, you lack justice. And that's what's really important.
All right.
I don't disagree with that at all. I agree with it, but I think part of the problem is really is deeper than that, and that's that we've given prosecutors way too much power. All the public defenders in the world are not going to protect us when we have these laws that are overly broad, and they're things like mandatory minimums, where there's these lifetime sentences hanging over somebody, and they're being told, you've got 30. You're looking at 30 years maybe if you had a trial. If you plead guilty, you can go home after 5. Or you've been charged with felony terroristic threats, and you're looking at a felony conviction and a year or more in prison. Admit the facts today. You'll get a stay of adjudication, and you won't have a conviction on your record. Well, people hear, I won't have a record. That's good. What they don't realize is they're still going to have the record and still going to show felony. It just doesn't say conviction, and employers don't know the difference. So, I agree with Mark on that, but I just think, boy, through the way we've made our laws, we've just given the prosecution a lot of power, and I've seen at the Capitol that our prosecutors' lobby has a lot of power as well, and I guess the way to fight that is, again, to show up and change some of those laws.
Amen. Good.
I see nodding on the other end of the table. Any other?
I just simply agree. Particularly when you get into the federal system, it's hard, it's difficult to find an attorney that will really challenge that system. And they have so much power, and they have inexhaustible resources that they wear you down. And by the time you really get to the point of being able to, even if you're innocent, you end up pleading guilty. That's why they win, 90-some% of their cases? Nobody wins 90-some% of nothing unless you're cheating.
That's right. Can I just say?
Yeah.
I just want to underscore Mark's comment. The only way to fix this is by showing up at the Capitol. Like these guys are full-time paid lobbyists. They go and they have the ear of our elected officials all day long. And if we don't show up, and I just want to say real quick, next Tuesday we are loading buses from the north side, from the south side. Wednesday, thank you. Next Wednesday we are loading buses from the north side and from the south side, and we are bringing our community to the Capitol. And if you guys know folks in the community and want to keep going to the Capitol after Wednesday, you should show up on Saturday when we'll be talking about how we're going to do that.
Yeah.
We have the action page in here, and people can sign up for the bus. Check your action page, because there's directions for you to sign up to go. There's a bus going from Emerge on the north side and PPL on the south side, I think. For next Tuesday or Wednesday, and I'm going to go. I've already signed up to see my legislator too. That's what we have to do. We have to all show up over there.
She really does. And
I want to weigh in on reinforcing that a few voices from constituents, consistent voices from constituents, is the one thing that can stand up to the paid lobbyists, because usually the paid lobbyists can't vote for the person in the office. And so, whoever your representatives are, they should hear from you on a regular basis, not just when bills are up, but they need to know you as a person establish a relationship and be there with them as they go through what is not easy for them either. So I think we can all weigh in on the need for constant communications with our elected officials. Question, should police officers be in schools?
No.
Okay.
Let's settle that. I really don't. I don't see the need for them to be in the schools and particularly active in the way that they've been active in the schools. If the schools need a police officer, they can call one. The principals need to take back the authority in the schools. The teachers need to take back the authority, and we need to get creative about how we deal with difficult young people and stuff. This whole siphon, this prison, cradle to prison pipeline is about a demonic siphon that is sucking our children into a way, into a pattern of living that brings them straight into prison. And part of that is in the school system and the way that they herd kids into certain classes, the way they do detention, the way they do the way they do things, having a police officer in the school, arresting kids for stuff that we used to do when we was in high school that we didn't get arrested for, getting suspended for stuff that we used to do that we didn't get suspended for. You know, it just doesn't make sense, and we don't allow young people to be young people anymore. We have, and I know that there's violence, I know there's other things going on, but I also know that there's other ways of dealing with that, and that we have to get creative about how we begin to deal with those issues. And we can't say that every time there's an issue, we're going to suspend somebody, we're going to arrest somebody, we're going to incarcerate somebody, because it doesn't warrant that.
And again, just to emphasize, these are all school board decisions. These are policy decisions. And again, as we all know, our school board members are politicians.
So I'll expand my answer briefly. So I'll be honest, like Officer Adams at North High School is one of my favorite people. Like, this is a guy who coached the football team and has turned that team around, has been a mentor to my mentee and helped him mature as a young man. And there's a lot of great things that have come from that relationship. The problem I have with police in public schools is that the institution of the public schools, man, I make it a policy not to talk about education, so I'm trying not to get too deep down this rabbit hole. But the institution of public schools being married with the institution of the criminal justice system is a problem. And I'll be honest, like I was 13 years old the first time I was assaulted by a police officer, the first time I saw the inside of a jail. And it is not a coincidence that those patterns continued in my life. Those interactions with the police continued in my life. And I'm just saying that, like, do we want to teach kids how to be students and learn to be adults, or do we want to expose them to these ideas of expurgation and banishment from the mainstream of society before they even have learned how to trust that they belong into the mainstream of society? And I'm just not cool with that. Like, I don't want my kids growing up and I understand that police have well intentions, that they want to be our children's friends and whatnot. And I have a solution for that. Move into my neighborhood. Maybe if you lived in my neighborhood and you policed in my neighborhood, then you would have different relationships in my neighborhood. Because I remember Officer Kevin, who lived around the block from me, had great relationships with me and all my friends when I was a kid. But being at my school, I know that like we had issues, and I can name people who have died because of decisions that officers have made when I was a kid.
A question about the recruitment of Black and Latino officers. Can you speak to progress or not progress in the Minneapolis capacity to hire police officers of color?
I can, and if I could just make one comment about the school, I do have the juvenile division who has the school resource officers in my bureau, and we really very seldom make an arrest in the school. The things that we really do there is we connect with those kids and try to build relationships, and the next step is then to recruit them to be police officers. So that's how I see my cops in the schools. What was the question? I'm sorry.
Speak to
hiring.
Yeah.
Hiring diversity. Yeah. So as everyone knows, there's a gray tsunami going on in the Minneapolis Police Department, and so there's a lot of people who are retiring. Well, some of it's just color it. And so we're bringing on a lot of folks. And the last couple of years, what we're seeing is a lot of military people coming out, and they're getting a point or two up on the testing, so they're coming in, and we're not seeing our kids of color coming on the police department. So we've started a CSO program, community service officer program, where we're taking these kids, and we have I don't know if anybody knows in the room Jan Calloway, but she's our CSO sergeant, and so she's working with these kids from the city to bring them on, teaching them, how to do an interview, how to dress for the interview, making sure that, they're physically fit. She, works with them every Saturday morning. Once in a while I go up and work out with them also, and I still got it. And so, we're trying to encourage those kids to come on, and again, through school, through Police Athletic League, through relationships that we're trying to build on the street and bring those kids on. So unfortunately, the city will not let us see the race before they go through the background check, and then we sit in the circle and we try to decide who to hire. And it's just unfortunate that I wish we could see that. So we're almost going into it blindfolded, and that's why I say I think I'm trying to have those conversations where, so what if they got picked up for petty this or petty that, or some driving regulations. We've got the potential to hire some really good people from the city who will be great cops.
Yeah.
Who when I look back on my career, I have my partner came from the projects in Minneapolis, and Spanky's son,
Spanky's
father.
son. Yeah, okay.
And who I've known Spanky since he's been, knee high. So, this is our opportunity to do something different, and sometimes, the city does handcuff our hands. So, but if folks who are interested, let's funnel them to me. Let's funnel them to, Jan Calloway, to people, and so we can get them through the system. We're hiring community service officers right now, and we're hiring regular officers. So we want to bring folks on, and if you can give them a recommendation, I think we can give them a chance.
I just want to add something quick there on that. About I think 3 or 4 years ago, I was at a forum where the police chiefs of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I think Richfield were together, and it was about diversity hiring, and they were all complaining about the difficulty finding candidates of color. And I looked at the post requirements, and if somebody's ever been convicted of a felony as an adult, they can never be a police officer. Kris, you're the first police officer I've heard bring this up, and I think this is really, really exceptional. I think you're going to have probably a hard time doing anything about it on your own. So if there's anything that we can do to partner on that, I would be happy to do that. I think being a police officer is a very honorable job, but the police need to reflect our community. They're very good jobs. And if we can get, but I just think, those policies, again, those are going to tie hands on being able to do that, and it makes no sense. So I hope that we can do something about that.
Well, on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for bringing us their experience and expertise, and thank you for being out here this evening. Thank you.